Shavua Tov. Had you been in shul listening to this live this morning, it would have been Shabbat Shalom. Now it's Saturday Night Live. That was an image and a sound that's ingrained in my head growing up, listening to the announcer at Saturday Night Live with all of the actors. I guess you can tell what generation I am when it's Dana Carvey and Nora Dunn who come to mind. But we're not here to reminisce about Saturday Night Live. We're here to, in the afterglow of Shabbat HaGadol, talk about the upcoming holiday of Pesach. And I'd like to share some ideas with you relating to a very fundamental ritual of the Seder night, that is the Arba Kosot. But not just 4 cups. I'd like to argue that 5 is the new 4. And we'll review some of the sources relating to the 4 cups, what they represent, how essential they are to the Seder, the lessons that are intrinsic to the 4 cups, and see that maybe there's a 5th cup. Maybe there should be a 5th cup, there could be a 5th cup, there was a 5th cup, and how to transition that into an even more meaningful Seder experience. I'll be utilizing the source sheet and referencing the numbers on the source sheet that was sent along with the email. You can print it up or follow along. And let's delve into the 4 cups of the Seder. Now, of course, we know Arba Kosot, and it's one of the first laws we learned about the Seder night in the Mishnah and Arvei Psachim, source number 1, that as the Seder approaches, we don't eat, we get ready to start the Seder at night with gusto. And the Mishnah reads, Afilu ani Yisrael lo yochal ad sheyasev. The poor person also has to recline, the idea of freedom, which we'll come back to. V'lo yivchetu lo me'arba kosot shel yayin va'afilu min hatamchoy. Every person has to have 4 cups of wine. Even a poor individual who is supported by the communal fund has to have 4 cups of wine at the Seder night. This is actually the source for Ma'ot Chitim, the Passover tzedakah that communities collect this time of year. It's called Ma'ot Chitim because it's the money for the wheat, because Shmor Matzah is very expensive, Pesach is expensive, but it initially is introduced to us as the money for wine. Ma'ot Chitim originated at Ma'ot Yayin. Everyone has to have 4 cups of wine. It's so essential that everyone must have it, and the poor person has to get it, and we have to ensure that everyone can celebrate Pesach the right way, and that's what the 4 cups of wine are essential. There's a story about Reb Chaim Brisker, Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik's grandfather, who oversaw the community charity fund for Pesach, and people would come forward to collect what their needs, and there was a list and there was an amount, and someone came to collect his amount and asked Rabbi Chaim, can I use 4 cups of milk instead of 4 cups of wine? And Rabbi Soloveitchik explained, no, you can't use 4 cups of milk. It's 4 cups of wine. Wine is freedom. You have to use 4 cups of wine. And then Rabbi Chaim turned to his assistant and said to give him twice the amount that he had been assigned to get. And the assistant afterwards was surprised, and Rabbi Chaim explained, if he wants to use 4 cups of milk, it shows that he doesn't have any meat at the Seder either. And so his needs are more, and we have to give him therefore more. So we have to have 4 cups of wine. Everyone has to have 4 cups, and this is an essential ruling with regards to supporting people for Pesach, as we do year-round. 4 cups of wine. Why 4 cups of wine? So I can hear you saying, oh, the 4 languages of Geula. And of course, Rashi quotes that there are 4 languages of Geula. Source number 2, v'hotzeti, v'hitzalti, v'ga'alti, v'lakachti, that are expressed part of the redemption process. This is not the only source trying to explain the cups of wine. The Yerushalmi Talmud in Psachim, source number 3, mentions that there are other 4s that we have. Obviously 4 of the mothers, but there are 4 other expressions as well. 4 terms of deliverance, 4 cups of Pharaoh mentioned in the dream with the baker and the butler. The 4 kingdoms who ruled over the Jewish nation, Egypt, Babylonia, Persia, and Rome. But maybe it's the 4 cups of doom that they will drink upon being defeated, or the 4 cups of consolation and salvation that the Jewish people will enjoy at the end of days. So 4 is a significant number, 4 cups of wine, 4 cups of wine. We have these 4 cups. What do they represent? Is it drinking wine only, or is there something more that is involved? So the Talmud in Psachim 108b, source number 4, talks about there are actually 2 different elements to these cups of wine. There is the drinking of the 4 cups, and there is the drinking of wine that is enjoyable. And the Talmud gives an example of what happens if a person would drink undiluted wine. Back in the day, the wine had to be diluted. It was so strong, they had to mix in water, 3 times as much water as wine. And what if you drank an undiluted cup? So the Talmud says you have fulfilled your obligation. You have fulfilled your obligation of actually drinking the cup of wine. And if you drink 4 cups like this, 4 cups of wine. But then the Talmud says, but the obligation to express freedom has not been fulfilled. Yidei yayin yatsa, you fulfill the obligation of wine, but yidei cherut lo yatsa, you haven't fulfilled the obligation for freedom. And the Rambam, Maimonides, when discussing this law and the idea of the Seder in general, highlights specifically this idea of freedom at the Seder. As he writes, source number 5, in every generation one must show himself as if he personally had come out from the subjugation of Egypt. Remember that you were a slave, meaning to say as if you yourself had been a slave, came out to freedom and were redeemed. Hence, when a person eats at that night, he must eat and drink while reclining in the way of freedom. Regarding the 4 cups, one must mix them in order that the drink be pleasant. It is all according to the wine and according to the opinion of the drinker. The Rambam talks about freedom, and not only the idea of freedom as it's represented by telling a story or by reclining, but you have to enjoy it. You should have something that you like at the Seder. What kind of wine? It has to be enjoyable. Wine is an expression of freedom. There's a separate mitzvah to feel free at the Seder. Almost as if you don't enjoy it, you didn't fulfill your obligation. There's an interesting question in halacha based on Gemara and Psachim a little bit later, that wine is known as an intoxicating beverage. That's wine by a halachic definition. So what happens if a person likes grape juice and doesn't like wine? Can one drink grape juice instead of wine for the 4 cups? So Rav Moshe Feinstein says no. Wine is the liberating beverage of the Seder. The Talmud insists upon wine. You can water it down, you can mix it with grape juice, but you need to have 51% wine for the 4 cups. And Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik the Rav says no. Freedom. If it's borei pri hagafen, if it qualifies as a religious halachic beverage, then enjoy it. That's what's most important at the Seder, to enjoy the Seder, to elicit freedom at the Seder. The 4 cups of wine, which are essential for every single person to have, so much so that we have to provide it if they don't, is because it's our mission to provide this experience of freedom at the Seder. We have to learn the message of freedom, what it means, what it meant to our ancestors, and what it means to us. Wine also represents the victory and the eternity of the Jewish people. Right, what do we say when we drink the wine? L'chaim, to life. Leon Kass, the scholar and commentator, notes, source number 6, you don't have to be Jewish to drink l'chaim, to lift a glass to life. Everyone in his right mind believes that life is good and that death is bad. But Jews have always had an unusually keen appreciation of life, and not only because it has been stolen from them so often and so cruelly. The celebration of life, of this life, not the next one, has from the beginning been central to the Jewish ethical and religious sensibilities. In the Torah, be fruitful and multiply is God's first blessing and first command. Judaism, from its inception, rejected child sacrifice and regarded long life as a fitting divine reward for righteous living. Indeed, so strong is this reverence for life that the duty of pikuach nefesh requires that Jews violate the holy Shabbat in order to save a life. Not by accident do we Jews raise our glasses l'chaim. The 4 cups of wine at the Seder represent freedom. They also represent victory and survival in the eternity of the Jewish people. And everyone has to participate and has to experience that. But there's a glaring question. Are there really only 4 expressions of redemption? The other reasons given by the Yerushalmi, maybe there were 4, but are there really only 4 expressions of redemption? When we look in Parshat Va'era, Shmot, chapter 6, source number 7, there are other languages, other expressions there. There's V'hotzeti, V'hitzalti, V'ga'alti, V'lakachti. I know you're thinking V'heveti, but there's another one. V'datem ki ani Hashem. Part of the Exodus is you will know that I am Hashem your God. And then V'heveti, and then I will bring you. V'natati, and I will give you the land. So there's more expressions of redemption. Why do we focus only on 4? What happened to V'heveti? What happened to being brought to the land? Maybe it's not part of the Pesach redemption process, but isn't that part of who we are as Jews today? So the Hadar Zakenim Ibale HaTosfot comment, really, when it comes to the languages of redemption, there are 4, but we have that 5th one. Maybe there's a possibility it hangs there, like the hanging chad in the 2000 election. We have a reference to a possible 5th cup. So maybe we have 4 cups, even though there's more languages for redemption. Chatam Sofer, Rabbi Moshe Sofer of Pressburg, notes that, let's face it, there aren't 4 languages of redemption. There are 6. I will free you, I will deliver you, I will redeem you, I will take you, I will bring you, I will give you. We decided to have 4 cups of wine for other reasons, maybe from the Yerushalmi. Maybe we should have more cups, maybe we should stop at 4. Except there is a tradition, a rabbinic tradition, a Talmudic tradition, that there are 5 cups. The Talmud in Psachim 118a, source number 10, Tanu Rabbanan Revi Gomer Alav Es HaHallel. The 4th cup is used for finishing Hallel and saying L'chaim one more time at the Seder. But if we look at the text that was used by Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi, the Rif, source number 11, he says Chamishi Omer Alav Hallel Gadol. It's the 5th cup for which we use, we say the Hallel, the great thanksgiving to God. So is it 4 or is it 5? Tosfot says on the spot in Psachim, no, it's 4. 4 and not 5, end of story. Maybe for him. The Ran Rabbeinu Nisim, source number 13, says no, we have a tradition that there are 4 obligatory cups, but there's a 5th cup which is an option to be used. If you want to drink it and to praise Hashem and give thanks even more so, Harei Zeh Meshubach, this is fine. This tradition of the 5th cup is carried forward into the Rambam. Maimonides talks about the end of the meal, we say the Birkat HaMazon over a 3rd cup. And then we pour a 4th cup for Hallel. And the Rambam concludes in source number 14, he should pour a 5th cup and say the great Hallel. And this cup is not obligatory like the other cups, but there is that 5th cup appearing in the Rambam. In the halachic codes which we turn, the Tur, Rabbi Yaakov ben Asher, source 15, or Chaim 481, Kos Chamishi. There is a 5th cup. Not in some texts found in other texts. The Gaonim discuss it. Some like it, some don't like it. Some mention that you should drink a 5th cup. And he says it's okay to have a practice to do it, and it's okay to have a practice not to do it. So it's in the codes. But the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Karo, the authoritative book of Jewish law, seems to cancel out the 5th cup. He ghosts it completely. In that same chapter, 481, we drink only 4 cups, and not to drink when we're done with the 4th cup. Only as a side note, Rabbi Moshe Isserlis, the Ashkenazi commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, says, and if you have a 5th cup, it's okay. Yachol, it's okay to have. But otherwise, a tradition which goes back to Rabbi Alfasi and the Gaonim, going back over 1,000 years of a 5th cup being an option, seems to be completely wiped away by the halachic process. What happened to the 5th cup? So, it's possible, as Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin says in his Hamek Davar, source number 17, the 5th cup connects not to I will bring you, not connects to Israel, but connects to Vidatem ki ani Hashem. One day you will know that Hashem, I Hashem, am your God. And it says this is complicated. Not everyone knows God the same way. And since Ein Chovah L'Chol Yisrael Lahagia L'Zeh HaMadrega, since not everyone can get to this level, this cup was written out of the obligations of the Seder. Some people, those of an exalted level, they can have a 5th cup, but it was written out completely. Or maybe the 5th cup was transformed, transitioned into the Koshel Eliyahu, Elijah's cup. The Koshel Eliyahu, which is a highlight for many at the Seder, we open the door, we see Eliyahu. I still remember, 4 years old, they filled up Elijah's cup. My uncle goes to open the door, and Elijah must have had a few too many Seders before ours, and the cup spilled. Now you may be thinking it was my father shaking the table, but I know the truth. But Koshel Eliyahu, maybe that's what happens. And in fact, Rabbi Baruch Halevi Epstein, turn to the 20th century, says, because of this 5th language of redemption, They established a special cup in the name of Elijah as a remembrance and hint that we hope for his coming and for the resurrection of the nation and the land speedily in our days. That fifth cup is held in abeyance. Since we're still in exile, we drink 4 cups, but maintain a 5th cup with an eye towards Eliyahu Hanavi. It's worth noting that this Koshel Eliyahu does not have a long ancient history. It's not found in the Talmud, it's not found in the works of the early authorities of the Rishonim, not mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch. One of the earliest mentions is found in Rabbi Yaakov Reischer's work, Chok Yaakov, from the 18th century. First printed in 1696, he wrote that in his area, people had the custom to pour an extra glass of wine and call it Koshel Eliyahu. No mention of the door, no mention of the 5th cup, but there's an extra cup. A parallel tradition from around the same time, Rabbi Chaim ben Veniste writes that some Ashkenazi Jews leave an empty glass in the middle of the table for the leftovers of each cup of wine, and they call it Koshel Eliyahu. Not sure how elevating it is to have a leftovers cup. Doesn't sound that appetizing. If I'm Eliyahu, I'll be a little bit insulted. But we have this custom, but it's only emerging some 400 years ago. Some say that the Koshel Eliyahu has a very interesting history coined by Rabbi Eliyahu of Vilna, the Vilna Gaon. The idea that if there's an argument whether there should be 4 or 5, who's going to settle the argument? Well, in Talmudic terminology, Eliyahu Hanavi. Tishbi yitaretz kushos v'abayos. Eliyahu Hanavi will come and answer, will resolve this for us when he comes. So we leave the cup on the table. Eliyahu gets to decide. Eliyahu's cup often captures the essence of the Heveti, of the ultimate redemption. Especially during the darkest moments of Jewish history, we've wanted redemption so badly that we could see it. If only we could see Eliyahu Hanavi. The Hasidic Rabbi Yismach Moshe once sent some of his Hasidim to Rabbi Moshe Sofer's Seder. When they returned, they told him that in the middle of the Seder something strange happened. A farmer came in, sat down at the table, drank a cup of wine that the Chassam Sofer gave him, and then the Chassam Sofer drank from the cup right after him. The Yismach Moshe thought that this farmer was Eliyahu Hanavi in disguise. The Chidushei Harim was once speaking about the greatness of Rabbi Cheskel Landau, known as the Nodab Yehuda. He said that when the Nodab Yehuda would recite the Shvo Chamatcha, pour out thy wrath, when we are willing to go out into the streets and pray that God avenge the Jewish nation. No small feat for Jews in more dangerous times. When the Nodab Yehuda would go out, he would escort Eliyahu Hanavi all the way to the street. Then he said that it's not that I actually see him, but rather I believe so strongly that he comes to everyone. And emunah, faith, is more important than seeing Eliyahu. As the Kutzker Rebbe like to say, believing is even greater than seeing. There's a Hasidic tradition among the Chabad Hasidim that they use Elijah's cup the next day for Kiddush. However, they pour a little bit more wine into it, because there's a rule: if a cup of wine has been sipped, it cannot be used for a blessing again unless it's refilled. So since Eliyahu sipped it from the night before, it has to be refilled. Eliyahu Hanavi connects the reality of today with the promise of tomorrow. And that is certainly a message for the 5th cup. But why don't we have that 5th cup? Why isn't it part and parcel? 4 are cups, why not a 5th cup with certainty? I think we can make a strong case that we should have an actual cup at the Seder. A 5th cup, more than 4. And it doesn't have to be wine, drink a little bit of grape juice for the 5th. It's time to bring the 5th cup out of the shadows, out of the realm of Elijah, and into our reality. The HaGadol of the Maharal, Rabbi Judah Lowy of Prague, was published by Rabbi Yudel Rosenberg in 1935. Rabbi Yudel Rosenberg published this HaGadol, which had not been seen before. He mentions that it had come from a hidden library. And in that HaGadol, the Maharal writes the instructions for the end of the Seder and points out that after the Hallel, you should introduce the 5th cup. Hinni muchana mezuma, and here I am ready, likayem mitzvah kos chamishi. I'm going to fulfill the mitzvah of the 5th cup, which corresponds to the language of redemption, veheveti etchem. I will bring you. And then it says that the head of the household drinks the fifth cup, says the bracha, drinks the fifth cup without a bracha, and reclines. A fifth cup, part and parcel of the service. Now the possible problem is that this was not really the HaGadol of the Maharal. Source number 20. Eliezer brought in the Sfarim blog. In 1905 in Warsaw, Rabbi Yehuda Rosenberg printed the Haggadah of the Maharal, which he claimed was from a manuscript of the Maharal's son-in-law. There's a lengthy discussion there of the number of glasses of wine one should drink at the Seder. Maharal concludes that one has to drink 5 cups. If this is correct, we have an early source of Koshel Eliyahu, Maharal, and based on his words, we would have many more early sources. There's various Rishonim listed by the Maharal mention the 5th glass of wine. However, it has been proven that although Rabbi Rosenberg was a tremendous Torah scholar, he was also a forger. He may have possibly had good intentions behind his forgeries. His most notable forgery was the story about the Maharal's golem, which is a discussion for another time. For those who are familiar with the golem, the spiritual man of clay animated by divine names, created by the Maharal, those stories also come to us from this Rabbi Yehuda Rosenberg. So there is a 5th cup, but we don't have a strong source. And in fact, it could be that what happened, as source number 21 mentions, the Dad Zakenim, while we've been deprived of our land being in exile, we do not drink the 5th cup, indicating that we look forward to doing so. The sooner the better. Now, Dad Zakenim lived long before the state of Israel. And that argument works until 1948. We are no longer deprived of our land. And maybe that 5th cup, which has Talmudic textual origin, which is discussed in the codes, which seems to get erased during our very long diaspora, needs to come out of the shadows and into reality now with the state of Israel in the beginning of our redemption. Rabbi Menachem Mendel Kasher, a fascinating scholar and chassid and religious Zionist, felt that we need to have a 5th cup. He analyzed all of the sources and studied the Maharal Haggadah, even though it may come from dubious origins. And in the end, he felt we have to have a 5th cup. We have a state of Israel. Source number 22. Bizmaneinu anu, shezachinu lirot chastei Hashem yisbarach. We've seen God's great kindness. B'hakamat medinat Yisrael she'atchalta d'geula of Yeshua. Beginning of the redemption from the times of Rome. V'heveti etchem has been fulfilled. I brought you to the land. We have to give thanks. We have to appreciate. We have to recognize this. Just like we've seen the beginning of the fulfillment of I will bring you to the land. So we'll have the ultimate redemption with Mashiach coming. Therefore, we have to have that 5th cup. We need to have a tangible reminder at our Seder of Elijah the prophet of the redemption of the state of Israel. It doesn't have to be about the amorphous Elijah the prophet. We have to have a 5th cup because we have the state of Israel. We need that tangible reminder. Think about the rest of the Seder. The other cups, the matzah, the maror, the shankbone, these are all tangible reminders of principles which are important to us. How much more so the state of Israel and the redemption that we've experienced in the last 100 years. People have suggested adding all sorts of different rituals to the Seder. Miriam's cup, an empty chair for Soviet Jewry during its time, or for missing soldiers. The Seder is full of symbols and tastes and experiences to make the Exodus and our becoming a nation real. Today, blessed with the modern state of Israel, we should restore the 5th cup to its rightful place. Doing so will focus our hearts and minds to Israel. This isn't about Zionism or encouraging Aliyah, as important as they may be. Recognition of the blessing we have and a realization of that the Jewish future is so much influenced by Israel. This week, Gil Troy, a professor and author, wrote an op-ed. Its purpose was to highlight a growing divide between diaspora Jews and Israel. And that's a separate topic for another time. But a few passages there capture a certain aspiration for a connection we should feel towards Israel. We should have a very natural and real connection. He's writing to friends living in the diaspora. Dear Fagi and David, source 23. Your supportive emails expressing deep, profound grief moved me. As we in Israel dug 11 new graves for innocent terror victims, 3 more were murdered on Thursday night. If Star Trek invented the Vulcan mind meld, you epitomized the Jew fuse. Our souls are interconnected. Our nerve endings are intertwined. Our pain is your pain, and your pain is our pain. Addressing most other American Jews, it's gut check time. Ask yourselves, last week, how often did you think about or talk about the slap Will Smith gave Chris Rock during the Oscars? Compare that to how much you thought about the Colleyville, Texas crisis in January, before every hostage was freed, and how scared you were by 2018's Pittsburgh massacre, which killed 11. By contrast, did you think at all about any of these people last week? Yazan Fala, Shirel Abu Akrat, Amir Kuri, Avishai Yecheskel, people who were killed in the terrorist attacks in Israel. Moreover, did you reach out to their families or those of the other 7 murder victims within 8 days? Will you leave an empty seat at your Seder table in their memory? Did you reach out to any of our soldier heroes or police heroes or their families who are working around the clock to protect us? You could, for example, send gift certificates for free food to Israeli cafes, or simply attaboys and attagirls. Are you at least wondering how you can help somehow, how you can heal this collective Israeli and Jewish trauma? And there's no easy way to connect to life in Israel without actually living there. But Gil Troy highlights the need for all of us, including those of us who are so supportive of Israel, and we donate there, and we visit there, and we study there, we have children there, for a real tangible reminder of the state of Israel in our redemption that we've experienced. If we can keep it in mind conceptually or in our hearts, it needs to be in our hands and in front of our eyes. I was preparing this Derasha when the news broke out about the terrorist attack in Tel Aviv on Thursday night. And I know that our daughter Meira was spending Thursday in Tel Aviv. For the first time, even though she made Aliyah and serves in the IDF, not in combat, I was nervous. I was even more nervous when I called her and she didn't answer the phone. Thankfully, she called back a few minutes later and was far from the scene when the shots started firing. Obviously, it's different when we know we have skin in the game and loved ones there. But is it? What is our connection to Israel? Thank God we are part of the solution. We are among the Fagis and Davids who have our hearts and souls and our prayers with those in Israel. We're connected and supportive. But so were many others a generation or two ago. That 5th cup will be that tangible reminder. That 5th cup of the cups of wine at the Seder, which represent freedom, which represent victory, which represent the future and the survival of the Jewish people, and bringing everyone involved, because everyone has to have them. Everything that these 4 cups represent, it all reaches a climax in the Heveti, in having that state of Israel and moving forward to further redemption. That's worth another cup, or at least discussing why we should. May we all experience the redemption of the Seder night. May the world experience redemption. May the people of Israel in the state of Israel experience redemption. Chag Kasher V'Sameach.